I used to think that goals are, first of all, they have to be like, challenging goals, like set the bar high, gotta shoot for the moon kind of stuff. And also like follow, all those smart sort of stuff about goals. But also they have to be met. These goals have to be met. And when I don't meet them, oh my God, I feel so bad. I feel depressed. I berate myself. I scold myself. I ding myself with the head.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, where we are reimagining and redefining what it means to be in midlife, where we are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, my friends. I am so excited to be doing something a little bit different today. Very excited. I have my friend Lou Blaser on a call with me right now, and we're not going to do a regular format of my podcast. We are just going to have a conversation. And so I want to take a moment to introduce you to Lou Blaser if you have not heard her on previous podcast episodes before. Lou Blaser is the writer and publisher of Midlife Cues, and she is also the host of a fantastic podcast, which is how I originally met her, which is called Second Breaks. And we have been friends, gosh, Lou, for how long now?
How old is your podcast?
Right? Because you were guest number 2 on my podcast, episode 3. And that would have been June of 2020. So
there you go.
There you go. Wow.
It feels longer though.
It does. And we've met only once in real life, but we did get to meet in real life, which is really cool. So up to this September, you were my virtual friend.
Yes, exactly.
So Lou and I are playing a little game going into the 2023. We're sitting here and it's November 29th of 2022. This podcast episode is coming out in my first one of January for 2023. And we're having a little experiment. We're going to be on each other's podcast the plan is quarterly.
Yes.
Right? And we're just going to talk about topics
that are hopefully interesting to our listeners.
This is starting to feel like a Seinfeld episode, Lou. It's a show about nothing.
Exactly. Well, first of all, to the late bloomers out there, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year.
January, right? This is going out to Happy New Year.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to be in your ears on Yvonne's podcast. So thank you for having me over in your living room.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So cool. So real quick, Lou, I'm going to put you on the spot. I want you to tell people a little bit more about Midlife Cues. I read it every week. It lands in my inbox. I love it. I want you to what's your reason for Midlife Cues? What is your big drive for doing that? And what are you trying to do with it?
So the short story is that I had to do something in and around 2020, right around the middle of the pandemic. There was a big change that was happening in my life, and I had to do something that was not going to require me to show up in a particular state of mind. Let me just say that so that people don't think that I'm talking weirdly. I was going to move to temporarily relocate to the Philippines to be with my mom, who had dementia. And I had no idea what kind of situation I was going to be around. I didn't know if it was going to be depressing or anything like that. So I felt like I didn't want to be needing to show up to work with clients, for example, that would require me to be in some kind of an emotional sort of state.
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't sure what kind of environment I was going to be in. So I leaned in on my love for research and writing at that point in time, because I felt like writing is something we can do anytime, anywhere, however mood, like actually sadness and writing go hand in hand, right? So they say. So I was like, I'm going to lean into my research and love of rabbit holes and love of writing. And what do I want to talk about? Well, what do I want to research and what do I want to talk about or write about? Well, midlife, this season of our lives, because I've been researching about it anyway. And so that's kind of what I played around with in 2020, not realizing that it was going to turn into something more, shall we say, formal, like a newsletter, Midlife Cues. I thought I was just, researching and writing about this. And then in the beginning of 2021, I went full in and I'm like, you know what? I'm getting a lot of positive feedback and positive reactions about the topics that I'm writing about. So I'm going to make it a formal sort of thing. And so I burst Midlife Cues in 2021. And it's a newsletter about midlife, but very specifically about intentional living and personal growth in midlife. And I write it for anybody who self-identifies as a midlifer, whatever age you're in.
Yeah. And thank you for it, because your love of rabbit holes, we share that. And getting those dropped into my inbox on Sundays, I always look forward to it, because you find all these articles, and then you go a little bit deeper and talking about the articles that you found. And there's throwback things that you do looking back, on Gen X type remembrances.
Right, exactly.
And you always keep me thinking about topics for my podcast and for what I'm doing. And
that's awesome.
Oh yeah, it totally feeds into my thought process for, what are people dealing with at this point in their lives. And I don't know if I've ever told you that before, but
no, I didn't know. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that, you are a regular reader. Thank you so much. And I know you share it. Sometimes I see you sharing it on social media. So thank you so much. And thank you for letting me know about that, because I didn't know that that's, one of the use cases of the newsletter. So I'm so happy to hear that. But I know we're going to talk about our sort of like kind of towards the year end and kind of what we do around the year end to review our stuff and to prepare for next year. But I didn't think that I was going to say this when I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, but just because of the way that I found my way to Midlife Cues was accidental. Like I said, it wasn't like a planned, this is what I'm going to do. It was more like, I'm going into a situation that I wasn't entirely sure about the environment that I was going to find when I find myself there. And so I wanted to do something that would still keep my brain active and me active and engaged. And yet I found something that was very meaningful for me and for the people who get it. So sometimes we stumble upon new paths without planning for it. We just go with the flow. For the new year.
Yeah. I think that is ideally, I feel like I kind of wish that for everybody.
Yeah.
That,
right?
You start down a path and, I was reading, I posted something the other day that was a photo that was taken of Robin Williams. I don't know if you saw this, but it's a photo of him in a very posh hotel, and he's reading a newspaper. He's got one leg crossed over the other, and he's kind of just paying attention to what he's reading. And right next to him is a chambermaid for the hotel, hanging from a chandelier with her legs kind of, and she's like a middle-aged, regular looking lady, hanging from the chandelier in the hotel room. And so the whole story behind that was that the photographer had a plan for him to be hanging from the chandelier because he's funny and that would
Yeah.
be funny, right?
And that's the
So
kind of thing he would do.
right. And so they went to a lot of expense and effort and rigged the chandelier. So like rigged a chandelier in the hotel room to be able to hold the weight. So there was
Right.
a lot of expense and planning that went into this photo shoot, only to find out I don't think he knew any of the plans for this, to find out that he had just had surgery on his shoulder.
Oh no.
And there was going to be no hanging from chandeliers for Robin Williams that day. So it was like, oh, geez, okay, that's not going to happen. But what do we
do now?
Right?
Right.
What do we do now? And so this was the thing that they came up with.
Oh, that is perfect.
Isn't that genius? And that was the first thing that struck me, was the idea of how we make plans. You know, they say you if you want to make God laugh, make plans, right?
Yes.
So we make plans and we have an idea about how things are going to go and how we want them to go. And then, nope, we're going to have to take a little left turn here, kiddos.
Exactly.
and then how do you deal with that? And then
exactly,
looking at the photo, I was like, the photo is wonderful. And never would have happened.
Right. Can you imagine? And people, if I didn't hear about that background, I might have thought that was the plan.
Sure.
All along. Right?
Life is what happens when you're making other plans.
Exactly.
How many other like quotes can I come up with here?
Exactly. But sometimes, like in my case, it was a pleasant surprise, one that I didn't anticipate. But at the same time, I was asked this question very recently, is like the marriage of passion, that whole thing about do your passion and do your, passion. And he was talking about the marriage of, basically he was saying he doesn't believe entirely with following your passion. What he believes in is marrying your passion with your talent. And he was asking me whether, when I came up with Midlife Cues, whether this was what I was thinking about, was marrying my marriage with my talent. I was like, no, I was not thinking about that. I was thinking about, I was going to be with my mom who had dementia. I didn't know how it's going to affect me emotionally. Mm-hmm. So I needed to be doing something that didn't require me to be emotionally stable. That was what I was thinking.
A plan that was going to allow for the bandwidth that was going to be available to you, which you had no idea what that bandwidth was. So it was like, let's back off. And so remind me, you had the podcast going. Did you plan to stop the podcast and take a break from it just to give yourself that room as well? Because I know you kept going with it, but you've changed the frequency of your podcast, right?
That's what I did.
Larger breaks.
I always took off during the couple of weeks around the holidays, but what I did was I took a longer break between seasons, and I switched to every other week to give me a little bit of bandwidth, because that's the other thing I think that ties into our conversation about, how we're planning for the new year, because I think we have a tendency to just like, oh, what are the things I want to do? What are the things I want to do next? Because, we're excited, right? What are the things we're going to do? And then we end up with a long list of what are the things we want to do, or big projects, exciting projects. But then I don't know what you do, but like I tend to forget my capacity and bandwidth when I look at this list. All I keep thinking about is how exciting everything is on this list. Then I don't ask, do I actually have the bandwidth to do this? Do I have the capacity to do this? Time, energy, emotional bandwidth, resources, money sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I don't always ask those things. And so the last couple of years, especially since, I decided to do this, to be with mom, I had to like ask myself those questions, because I didn't know what kind of capacity or bandwidth I was going to be in. Do you ask yourself that when you plan for your
I'm
year?
learning to do that. I want to pat you on the back if I could pat you through the Zoom, through the Zoom camera here. But I think that it's the argument for how our brains work when we're older, that we have been around the block.
Mm-hmm.
We I think are probably a little more familiar with our ups and downs. And I think we get smarter about planning for
Yes.
contingencies. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
so that, I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm getting better at it, at going, okay, am I going to be able to do that so that the excitement of the project doesn't turn into heaviness of, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into?
Yes.
I'm
Right.
I'm failing and I can't get this done, and then it all feels heavy and
Yeah.
right. So that's that.
I heard someone, I like that. I heard someone say that the first thing they do when they plan for the new year is put in all their planned vacations and planned day offs. I was like, oh, because I don't do that. Usually I fill in my calendar first with like all the things I want to do and have to do. And then I look for the uh
For the
gaps
gaps,
where I
right?
can
Yeah, I
squeeze
think
in
most
the
people
vacation.
probably do that. Most people, I love that idea. Oh my gosh, put in the time you're going to take off and then go back and
First, right?
yeah.
That is
Wow.
awesome.
Think my head popped off my shoulders or something. What a cool idea is that?
Plan for the joyful, well, not to say that our projects aren't joyful, but you know what I mean. Like plan for those, like put those in there first, and
Yeah.
then
Well, okay.
fill
So
in the rest.
we're lucky, like you said. We're lucky. We have joyful plans, right?
Yes.
So we have a certain amount of privilege that allows us to be doing a newsletter and a podcast and
Mm-hmm.
such. But the trick is not to have it go from feeling like I get to do this to I have to do
Oh,
this,
yes.
right?
True. And that line,
It's
it
easy.
can easily cross over,
So
right?
quick, so quick. There are days I really do have to kind of like tap myself and go, it's not that you have to do this. You get to do
Get to do
this.
this,
You
right?
get to
Yeah.
do this.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah.
And when I'm
And
able to shift my brain over to that, 9 times out of 10, I'm like, oh, okay, right,
that's
right.
right. I used to think that those kinds of things, because I used to think those are just semantics, but actually, I know I can feel it in my body when I say I have to do something versus I get to do. I could feel the energy shift. So it's not just words, it's not just semantics. It
Yeah,
actually is doing something in there.
it really does.
It changes something,
It
right? It
does.
changes. Yeah. So the words that we use,
Yeah,
totally important.
big time, big
It took me
time.
a long time to learn that. Going back to what you said about, as we get older, we also, um, for most of us, for hopefully most of us, get wiser and learning from our own experiences. But yeah, it took me a while to get there, but I got there. That I'm careful about the words that I use, being deliberate about, especially when I talk to myself, kind of thing. Yeah.
So do you have a goal setting process? Okay, let's just get this out of the way. It's
You were going to
January.
tell people that we always have a problem talking for 30 minutes, remember?
Right. Yeah, that wasn't gonna happen, was it?
But to the late bloomers out there, we are trying. We are going to try very hard to keep this short.
That's
Try
right. We're
very hard.
trying. We're trying. And so I'm gonna open up a whole other big old can of worms if I or should I? I
No,
was
go ahead.
I
Let's
was
try
just
to do
going to
it.
ask you,
Yeah.
we have this, it's January and all of us feel so obligated to set resolutions or
Yes.
or goals for the year, even though it's arbitrarily,
Mm-hmm.
whenever with the first of the year. I definitely still feel the pressure for goal setting and looking back on the past year, reflecting different things like that. Do you have a process that you use
I
at the
do. I
beginning of the
end
year?
up, so I tend to be a little bit nerdy and structured about these things. And I think it's coming from my background because I used to be in corporate America forever. And in corporate America, especially the company that I used to work with, a very structured process for these kinds of things. And I was with them for many, many, many years. And so I think it's just in my DNA. So my body just like, it's December, you got to do a year-end review, you got to do some kind of planning. It's just in there. So, and so I do a structured process, less structured, obviously, than what I used to do when I was in corporate America. I've changed quite a bit, but I still do. I sit down and do a year-end review, like the year that's this 2022 that's ending. How did I do? What happened? I've done some bits of changes to that review process. I've learned how to be kinder to myself, especially for the goals that I didn't meet or targets that I didn't meet. That was one thing. But I'm going to tell you something about the goals too. But first, the process. So yeah, I do that, and then I do a year-end review, and then I do like a planning for the year type thing for the new year,
Are
and I
there
get very
particular
excited about it.
questions that you ask yourself for your year-end review?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things that I learned, and I don't know, I tend to forget, and this has nothing to do with old age. Even when I was in my 20s, this happened. In December, I tend to forget all the things that I've done or accomplished in the beginning of the year. And so what I learned is I forget who said this, and I adopted her practice. But for the last 3 years or so, throughout the year, every month end, I write down what I achieved that month. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could just be, I consistently published Midlife Cues this month, every Sunday, or I consistently released Second Breaks episode. It doesn't have to be like
because we
massive.
take it for granted, don't we?
Right.
We take it for granted that something that is an action that we expect of ourselves, we take it for granted, and we don't look at that as an actual achievement
when it actually does. Or like even stuff like I met my financial budget. Like if I wanted to, like there are months where, for example, I was traveling to the US. So the months before I was trying to tighten the belt a little bit because I knew I was going to spend more money in the US. So I met my budget for that month. I didn't spend over that budget. So I wrote those things every month so that when December comes, it's easier to reflect on my achievements, and it's easier to celebrate, and it's easier to pat myself on the back, because it used to be an ordeal, figuring out what to celebrate, because I tended to just think of the big things. Whereas we we forget the small things. So that's one of the things that I've done the last 3-4 years that have made such an improvement in my year-end process, particularly. Oh, and I wanted to say, and then I want you to talk about your stuff too, because I'm curious. But the one thing about goals is that I used to think that goals are, first of all, they have to be like, challenging goals, like set the bar high, gotta shoot for the moon kind of stuff. And also like follow, all those smart sort of stuff about goals, but also they have to be met. These goals have to be met. And when I don't meet them, oh my God, I feel so bad. I feel depressed. I berate myself. I scold myself. I ding myself on the head. And then a few years ago, Tara McMullen, who you and I both know her.
Yes, I was going to talk about this too, Lou. Yes,
she said something that had stuck in my brain. And she said, goals, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exact words, but basically the gist of it is that we set goals to change our behavior. So as soon as she said that, I'm like, oh my God, that is true. Because for example, let's say my goal is to lose 20 pounds. So before my thing was, okay, I'm going to fixate on the 20 pounds. And if I don't lose the 20 pounds, then I am upset with myself and all that kinds of stuff. But rather she said, you set goals to change your behavior. So the thing was to lose 20 pounds meant I would be more disciplined about what I eat. I would cut down on the sugar. It's those behavior changes that I should celebrate. And that's the point of setting goals. And when she said that, I was like, oh, that is such a big moment for me. And that changed my goal setting process from that point on.
You know what else was part of her? And it's so funny because I was totally going to talk about Tara McMullen as well. What I loved, what she did with us one year, was talking about embracing uncertainty. And the fact that the future is always uncertain. We're setting our goals, but the future is uncertain. So the idea of making plans and taking steps towards those plans with the knowledge that you're going to have to adjust as you go forward. And instead of focusing on the result of the 20 pounds, let's say, focus on the commitment to taking the actions. Instead of setting a goal that has like a randomly assigned outcome of the 20 pounds, like just committing to the goal is the action.
Yes, right.
Which like exactly. that goes into, you mentioned SMART goals, I think a second ago.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about those. So SMART goals, what are they? I'm looking at my notes. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So, right. Yes. So you've got this, if you're going to do, let's say, the losing weight thing, you make a goal out of losing weight. You decide, I'm going to lose 20 pounds in 3 months, right? It's specific, measurable, attainable, and time bound because you've got all those elements, right? But is it relevant?
Right.
Because like, is that a SMART goal or a SMAT goal? Because what, right?
I love that.
Like, what does 20 pounds really do for you?
Right.
And why are you picking that random number? So then I last year, I read this other idea, which I thought was really such a cool approach to it. And who can I give credit to on this? I'm looking at my notes again, and I'm probably butchering her name. Anne-Laure Lecomte. She has
I know her. She's the Nest Labs person. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
He was talking about having, like, if you've got one or more ambitious goals, like if you want to learn a language or write a book, grow a newsletter, right? You could make a pact instead of setting SMART goals. And the difference with the pact is that it stands for purposeful, actionable, continuous, and trackable. And so it starts with, what I love about it is it starts with purpose.
Right.
And that starts with looking at why.
Say that again. Purpose.
Purposeful, actionable, continuous, and trackable.
Continuous. That is interesting.
So continuous, repeatable action is part of it. Right. So you've got purpose first, then action, and then it's continuous action. It's like, so like you said, you celebrate at the end of the month, when you're looking at that, going back and tracking what you achieved that month, you produced your podcast as you planned. So that is action that is continuous and trackable, right?
That's right.
And it has a purpose.
So do you set goals for, because you have 2 businesses.
Yeah.
Do you set a specific goal for the photography business and then a separate goal for the midlife uprising and then a separate goal for the family? Like, how do you categorize? Do you get very nerdy about your goals?
Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, like I hardly ever reach my real goals. I don't ever reach my goals because I set goals, especially when I'm arbitrarily picking like the 20 pounds or
Right, right.
let's say an income number that I want to set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making those
Yeah.
goals. But what I am doing if I'm looking at the packed version of this, then I'm like, yep, I did it. I produced my podcast like I said
That's
I
right.
was going to this year.
Yeah.
Right. I take one of the things I set up last year was that I was going to try to grow my audience by taking action every day
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, yeah, I, I,
Mm-hmm.
I made that happen. Like through social media or through producing the podcast or through,
Mm-hmm.
all the little steps that go into doing it and trying to be thoughtful about it and spending time in Clubhouse talking and hosting
Mm-hmm.
rooms and being a podcast guest and all the different things. Like all of those are actions that I took to
Mm-hmm.
help grow the audience and help spread the message. Even more importantly, it's not even so much about growing the audience. It is, how can I get this message out there?
Right.
You know?
You know, this is the point where I still continue to have a challenge with, because let's say because we're both podcasters, so we probably have a common goal, that to grow our audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, I love all the stuff that you said about the actionable stuff that you can do to help grow the audience, which is the action that we can measure, and we could say, did I do those things? Where I have a challenge with still is that I still get fixated with the number.
Yeah.
So I would go, yes, I do the ABCDE, but then I didn't really get the million downloads. Boo! You know what I mean? This is a challenge I continue to have. So I'm glad you talked about that, because
Yeah.
maybe this year I won't set a number goal. I don't know. Do you set but you do set revenue goals. Do you do set number goals?
I do still set them, but I set them more like well, let's throw a number out there. Wouldn't it be, it's
Yes.
almost like a wouldn't it be nice number, you know?
Gotcha.
Wouldn't it be nice
Right.
if,
Right. Yeah.
And then I do what I do and I do what I can do. Let's put it that way.
Got it.
What am I actually capable of doing? Right. And then I
Right.
try to stretch my idea of what I think I'm capable of doing. I try to stretch that
Yeah.
and challenge myself so that it's not just stuff I feel comfortable with,
Right. Right.
But there's because I have come to decide that I love doing this work.
Yeah.
And I have a big goal for reaching people and wanting to get the message out. But selfishly, the personal growth that I'm getting out of doing this probably outstrips whatever impact I'm having greatly, And I look at the benefits of it and I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I started this podcast. I met you.
Exactly. Totally. Right.
And
all
you're not the only
stuff.
friend I've met doing like the only friend I've made I have a new friend in midlife. That's rare.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my gosh, Lou's my buddy now, and
we were talking about this a little bit a little bit unrelated to the goal setting thing, but you said right at the beginning of this conversation, we said it's only been like 2.5 years or 2 years or whatever, because it's however old your podcast is. But we feel like we've known each other for a long time. But I have a theory. I think it's because how we met is through the podcast, wherein we talk about real things. We don't talk about superficial, what's the weather type conversations. Our conversations are always deeper, and because podcasts, you're always talking about a topic, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so we fell into the habit. It's almost like we skipped all the superficial level conversations. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's what it felt like. It feels like we've been friends forever because we've gotten there already. We're there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. That is so true.
I wish
Wow.
that all the midlife relationships that we have, but it's not going to be like that because the context by which we meet people are different, obviously. But speaking of goals, that continues to be for the last 2 years now. It's been one of my goals is to um, build new relationships, nurture relationships that are important to me, and also build new relationships. And as an introvert, that's a new thing added to my goals. I didn't used to have that as a goal.
Me too. Me
But now
too.
it's there.
Yeah. It is that has been another benefit of doing the podcast is that I'm an ambivert, I guess you could
Mm-hmm.
say, because I have a lot of introvert qualities and need a lot of recharging time after
Mm-hmm.
big social events and things like that. But I do love to be with people as
Mm-hmm.
well, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's a funny thing. But yeah, doing the podcast has made me realize how much I love that connection. And because it is instant in a way, getting on a conversation on a phone call with somebody for an interview and just getting right into it.
Yes.
Like
Right.
talking about things that I love and I feel are important, and I'm asking about them and their backstory and their life, and boom, it's like, cutting through all the small talk and the different things that my introvert
Right.
self hates, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Like the dating, the first date type things. I hate the
Yes.
first date type conversations because it's like, can we just like talk about the real stuff?
Right. Right. Oh my goodness. So funny.
Can I ask you a question? Because do you plan when you plan for the new year, do you plan for the entire year or do you plan for 6 months or you do plan for first quarter? How do you plan?
I think I have an eye out to the year, kind of like in a broad brushstrokes kind of way.
Right.
But last year is the first time I toyed with this, with doing more of 90-day goals. And then I kind of lost the
Yes.
thread as the year went on, honestly, but started off with going, no, I'm not going to plan the year. I'm going to do 90 days.
So
And
was midlife uprising the summit part of your plan or it was one of those things that came up during the year?
I think I had it in my head going into, because in January, yeah, I had
Okay,
planned
got
it
it.
before the new year. I
Mhm.
had, it was just a little inkling of a seed at that point.
Oh,
And then by
yes.
May it was done. So that was,
Yeah.
half the year almost, right?
Yeah.
Almost. That's 5 months of
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. Do you and I don't know if you would be open to sharing it, but with me and with the audience, with the listeners, do you have a goal you said that you didn't meet that you're okay with or not okay with? But do you
Yeah,
have a goal?
yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I hosted a summit called Midlife Uprising in May
Mm-hmm.
for women, and I brought together a bunch of the people who've been guests on my podcast as speakers for it and all that. Um, and I had different goals set for that summit. Um,
Mm.
I was hoping, so the first goal I had was to create community, um
Mm.
for my speakers,
Mm-hmm.
to create community for the people, that for them to create community with the people who were there to watch the summit, to spread that message and create community around that message. That was my main number one. I wanted to grow my email list, and that was successful. I made that goal, and then I wanted to make money, and at least break even on my expenses, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I quite broke even, but I have to go back and look at the money. Terrible with numbers.
Right.
I don't even remember right now. So I have to go back and look and go, oh, maybe I did break even. It was close. You know what I mean? And I actually feel pretty good about that because I wasn't sure anybody was going to sign up for this thing.
Oh my goodness. That is one massive achievement that needs a lot of accolades and pats in the back.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. A lot of people came together and made that happen with me. And, 300
you created a space
people
for us.
signed up for the thing. And I was like, are 20 people going to come? I don't know. Exactly. What is this going to look like? It's like Field of Dreams. We build it and they will come. I don't know. So I've got, overall, I feel really, and again, I'll say that probably the biggest thing that I got out of it was just actually figuring, whoa, I did that.
Yes, absolutely.
I did that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. So there was that sense. Oh my goodness, Lou, I'm looking at the clock.
I know. How long have we been chatting already? It's always like this, folks. When we talk, it's always like this. And we look at the time, it's like, oh my goodness.
It is always like this. It's so funny. Well, I have to say that I think, what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago is that that you and I became friends, and our friendship became closer this year, and you're on the other side of the world in the Philippines,
Yeah, I'm back here.
Yeah. And I just my word for 2022 was community. That was, and I feel like, that was accomplished, because coming out of the summit, then I started the community Midlife Uprising, and I joined a mastermind, which has been tremendously community built, a clubhouse. Like I like on all fronts, I have really, I think I nailed that one this year.
Yeah, I totally agree.
A lot of personal growth, because I'm really kind of a bootstrapper, do it yourself kind of girl. Like, don't ask for help and just do your thing. And frankly, it's kind of lonely. And so that's what I wanted to outgrow that. And I think I still have a lot of outgrowing of that to do, frankly, but I'm learning.
But what I love about what you just said and the examples that you gave is, and I'm not just saying this because you're my friend and I'm looking at you through the camera, but when people say, we get to midlife and we get stale, or we don't grow as much anymore, or those kinds of stuff, and like you are, for me, it could, shining example of that's so not true. We continue to grow. We're not stale. We continue to grow. We grow in new places, new areas. We pick up new skills. We challenge ourselves continuously. And if you get stale in your midlife, or you stop growing in midlife, it's kind of like a choice. Kind of like, it's kind of like, you chose not to grow.
Yeah, this is a massive opportunity we're in the middle of. If you are listening and you're in midlife, you're sitting in the middle of massive opportunity to affect the next 20 to 30 years of your life by what you're choosing to do today.
Exactly. Totally. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I know you do. You live it. You're bold and brave, and
I try.
I'm proud of you, my friend.
Thank you. I try every day. I try.
That's all we can do, man. That's all we can do.
There's this song. It's an older song. I think I think it was the 80s. I think it's John Farnham or something like that. Anyway, it's I don't even remember. Oh, good Lord. See, sometimes you can't remember. I can't remember the title of the song. I will text it to you if you want to add it to the show notes, whatever. But there is a line there that says, "We're a voice of a generation." And I know that when he sang it, a lot of the people in their 20s were like, embrace that song because they're the voice of the generation and like to speak up and change the expectations and that kind of stuff. But I feel like to some degree, us who are midlife now, we are also a voice of a generation because we are sort of busting some myths and changing some older expectations and showing maybe a different side to midlife that isn't necessarily the story before, right? And I mean, I know our parents had a different kind of midlife, and so obviously they were responding to the opportunities that was their opportunities, right? Or what the world was like when it was their turn. But this is our turn in midlife, and so in a way that, like I said, that song of John Farnham, "We're a voice of a generation," I feel that way, and that's why I feel so in somewhat, I know it's overused, passionate, but also I feel like a sense of responsibility to be out there, to be talking about this. That's why I love what you're doing too, and I love seeing what you're doing on Instagram, for example, because to me that is what we're supposed to be doing: is to show up and to show this is an option, guys. This is another side of midlife. This is another way of doing it. And there's various ways of showing up in midlife. I know I like to say there are no midlife police because there's no one way of doing midlife. So just whatever, enjoy your midlife. And what you said, what we're doing today is the foundation for the next 10-20 years. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's my rant.
And I love that it's not just you and me on this, bandwagon and pounding this drum or beating this drum. That I really feel like this is a movement that's
absolutely.
that people are really, getting loud about this and saying, we need to rethink how we look at aging and how we look at what it means to be older and stop limiting ourselves, stop limiting other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect mindset to approach the year end and to approach a new year, right? Like that. That kind of mindset.
Yes. Let's make some waves, man.
Absolutely.
All right. Lou, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was so much fun.
I always love talking with you. And now you guys are privy to, guys, just so you know, this is how we talk. This is not even,
it's true.
This is not even like a talk that was geared for a podcast interview. This is just how we normally talk. So we figured, why not share what we talk about? Because we talk about midlife anyway. So our listeners, our people who hang out with us, will probably enjoy what we talk about. So there you go. It's an experiment. We're going to see.
Yeah. So here we go. And we'll do the next one and we'll do the next one. And
exactly.
Here we go. All right, Miss Lou. I love you.
I love you too. Happy New Year to everybody who's listening and hanging out with us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
The best 2023.
Happy New Year.
Yes.